Captain Marcus Chen heard the explosions before the alarms even started screaming. 3 years of serving as military advisor to the Valorian Empire had taught him to recognize the difference between training exercises and real attacks. This was real. He rolled out of his sleeping quarters in the guest wing of the royal palace, already reaching for his sidearm. The marble corridors that usually gleamed with soft blue light now flashed red with emergency warnings. Valorian guards rushed past him, their tall, elegant forms moving with surprising speed despite their ceremonial armor. Marcus grabbed the nearest guard by the shoulder. "Report, what's happening?" The young Valorian's golden eyes were wide with panic. "Coup attempt, Captain." "The Senate Guard has turned. They're trying to reach the royal family." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. The Senate Guard was the most elite unit in the Empire, trusted above all others. If they had betrayed the crown, then this wasn't just a simple rebellion. This was a coordinated attack from the inside. "Where's Princess Lyrelay?" Marcus demanded. "The safe room in the North Tower," the guard replied. "But sir, the elevators are down and..." An explosion rocked the palace, sending crystal chandeliers crashing to the floor. Marcus didn't wait to hear the rest. He sprinted toward the North Tower, his human legs carrying him faster than the Valorians expected. Their species was graceful and intelligent, but humans had one advantage they lacked: the ability to push past physical limits when survival was at stake. The corridors became a maze of chaos. Loyal guards fought desperately against their former comrades, plasma fire lighting up the darkness. Marcus ducked and weaved through the battle, his smaller human frame letting him slip past combatants locked in deadly embrace. He reached the North Tower to find the stairwell filled with smoke. Bodies lay scattered on the steps, both loyalists and traitors. Marcus climbed over them, his heart pounding. The safe room was on the 70th floor, and the emergency lighting flickered with each step he took. At the 43rd floor, he found them. 6 Senate guards in black armor stood outside a blast door, working frantically to break through its locks. They had almost succeeded. Sparks flew from the door's control panel as their cutting tools bit through the metal. Marcus counted his ammunition: 12 shots in his plasma pistol, plus 2 backup power cells. Against 6 heavily armored elite soldiers, it wasn't much. But Princess Lyrelay was behind that door, and he had sworn an oath to protect the royal family. He opened fire. The first guard went down before they even knew he was there. The second turned just in time to catch a plasma bolt in the chest. The remaining 4 took cover behind decorative pillars, returning fire with military precision. Marcus dove behind a fallen statue, plasma bolts scorching the air where his head had been moments before. This was what humans called a tactical disadvantage, a polite way of saying he was completely outnumbered and probably going to die. But dying wasn't the mission. Keeping the princess alive was. He waited for a pause in their fire, then popped up and put 2 shots into the lead guard's helmet. The Valorian armor was good, but human weapons were designed to punch through anything. The guard's golden blood splattered across the wall. 3 left. The problem was ammunition. Marcus had burned through half his shots, and the guards were being smart about their cover. They weren't going to make it easy for him. That's when he remembered something his old drill sergeant used to say: "When you can't go through the enemy, go around them. When you can't go around them, bring the building down on their heads." Marcus looked up at the ceiling. The North Tower was old, built in the classical Valorian style with heavy stone blocks held together by gravity and tradition. If he could weaken the support pillars, he switched his weapon to overcharge mode. It would drain his power cells faster, but each shot would pack 3 times the punch. He aimed at the base of the nearest pillar and fired. The stone cracked. Ancient mortar dust rained down on the guards, who suddenly realized what the crazy human was trying to do. They broke cover, rushing him all at once. Marcus rolled left, putting another shot into the pillar. A section of ceiling sagged ominously. The first guard reached him, swinging a plasma rifle like a club. Marcus ducked under the swing and put his pistol against the Valorian's neck. The shot that followed was messy but effective. 2 left, and they had him cornered. Marcus made his choice. He turned his weapon on the second pillar and kept firing until the power cell died. The ceiling groaned, then began to collapse. The guards tried to run, but humans had spent millions of years learning to predict when things would fall. Marcus knew exactly where to dive to avoid the avalanche of stone and metal. When the dust settled, he was alone. The remaining guards were buried under a ton of rubble, and the blast door to the safe room had been damaged but not breached. Marcus inserted his second power cell and got back to work. The door's locking mechanism had been partially destroyed in the collapse, but it was still holding. He had to admire Valorian engineering. Even damaged, their security systems were formidable. That's when he heard footsteps echoing up the stairwell. More guards were coming. A lot more, judging by the sound. Marcus checked his ammunition display. 6 shots left in his current cell, plus 1 backup. Against what sounded like a full squad of Senate guards. He smiled grimly. His grandmother had always told him that humans were too stubborn to know when they were beaten. Time to prove her right. The first wave came up the stairs in formation, their black armor gleaming in the emergency lighting. Marcus let them get close, then opened fire from behind the rubble pile. 2 went down before they could react. The others scattered, taking cover in the damaged corridor. Plasma fire lit up the air between them, turning the tower into a war zone. Marcus counted 4 shooters, maybe 5. His tactical computer would have called this certain death. Marcus called it Tuesday. He waited for them to reload, then sprinted across the corridor to better cover. A plasma bolt singed his shoulder, filling the air with the smell of burned flesh and fabric. He ignored it. Pain was just another piece of data, and right now he needed to focus on the math. 4 guards, unknown ammunition count. His position was defensible, but limited. The safe room door would hold for maybe another hour under sustained fire. After that, Princess Lyrelei would be exposed. Unacceptable. Marcus switched tactics. Instead of trying to kill all the guards, he focused on making them afraid. He used the rubble pile as mobile cover, popping up in unexpected places to take quick shots before disappearing again. He made noise in empty corridors, forcing them to split their attention. He turned the tower into a maze of shadows and uncertainty. Humans had learned to hunt in packs across the African savanna, wearing down prey that was bigger and stronger by making them panic. These guards were elite soldiers, but they had never faced a human who had nothing left to lose. One by one, they made mistakes. The guard who thought Marcus was hiding behind the statue died when he came around the wrong side. The sniper who tried to cover the stairwell learned that humans could climb along ceiling fixtures when properly motivated. The squad leader who attempted to flank through the damaged wall discovered that Marcus had been saving his last overcharged shot for something special. When the second wave arrived an hour later, they found one human sitting calmly beside the safe room door, field dressing a plasma burn on his arm. Around him lay the bodies of 12 Senate guards, arranged in a defensive perimeter that spoke of hours of methodical combat. Marcus looked up as the new arrivals approached, and they stopped dead when they saw his eyes. There was something in that gaze that made predators think twice, a cold calculation that promised violence to anyone who threatened what he protected. "I'm Captain Marcus Chen, military advisor to the Crown," he said quietly. "Princess Lyrelei is safe. Which side are you on?" The lead soldier, wearing the gold trim of the Imperial Guard, slowly raised his hands. "We're loyalists, Captain. The palace is secure. The coup has failed." Marcus nodded and let his weapon fall to his side. Only then did he notice that his hands were shaking from exhaustion. Only then did he feel the full weight of his injuries. Only then did he allow himself to believe that it was over. Behind him, the safe room door finally opened. Princess Lyrelei stepped out, her usually perfect appearance disheveled but her violet eyes bright with concern. "Captain Chen," she said softly. "Are you hurt?" Marcus tried to stand and immediately regretted it. The adrenaline was wearing off, and his body was sending him a very detailed inventory of every injury he had sustained. "Nothing that won't heal, Your Highness." 17 wounds, the Imperial Guard medic reported a few minutes later. Plasma burns, shrapnel cuts, blunt force trauma, and what appears to be a concussion. By our medical standards, he should be dead. Princess Lyrelei knelt beside Marcus as the medics worked on him. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you stay? You could have run when the attack started." Marcus managed a weak smile. "I made a promise, Your Highness. Humans keep their promises." As consciousness faded, he heard her speaking to someone in rapid Valorian. The words were formal, ceremonial, something about debts and honor and obligations that could never be repaid. Marcus would have paid more attention if he had known those words would change his life forever. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Marcus woke up in a room that looked like it belonged in a museum. The walls were covered with paintings that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them, and the bed he lay in was made from some kind of metal that felt warm to the touch. Everything around him screamed expensive in ways that human technology couldn't match. "You're awake?" The voice came from beside his bed, and Marcus turned to see a figure that made his breath catch in his throat. Empress Thyralis was not what humans expected when they thought of galactic rulers. She stood barely 5 feet tall, with the same golden skin and violet eyes as her daughter. But there was something in her presence that made the air itself seem heavier. When she looked at him, Marcus felt like he was being measured by something far beyond normal understanding. "Your Imperial Majesty." Marcus tried to sit up, then immediately regretted it as pain shot through his ribs. "Be still," the Empress commanded, and her voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed by entire star systems. "Your injuries were extensive." Marcus looked down at himself. His torso was wrapped in some kind of biomesh that glowed faintly blue. When he moved, he could feel the material working to support damaged muscles and bones. "How long was I unconscious?" 17 days, she replied. "Your species proved more challenging to treat than our medical staff anticipated." That explained the fancy equipment. Marcus had noticed that Valorian medicine was incredibly advanced, but it was designed for Valorian biology. Humans were different enough that their healing technology often didn't work properly on human tissue. "The coup," Marcus started. "Is finished," the Empress cut him off. "The traitors have been dealt with. My daughter is safe. The Empire is secure." She paused, studying his face. "All because of you." There was something in her tone that made Marcus uncomfortable. It wasn't gratitude exactly, it was heavier than that, more formal. Like she was reading from a script written in stone. "I was just doing my job." "Your Majesty." The Empress moved closer to his bed, and Marcus noticed that she was wearing ceremonial robes instead of her usual practical clothing. The fabric was covered with symbols that seemed to shift and flow like living things. "Captain Chen," she said, her voice taking on a ritual cadence, "you have preserved the life of my heir at the cost of your own blood. You stood alone against superior numbers and held ground that could not be held. You chose certain death over the smallest chance of failure." Marcus frowned. This sounded less like a conversation and more like a formal ceremony. "Your Majesty, In the ancient traditions of my people," the Empress continued, ignoring his interruption, "there exists a debt that cannot be measured in gold or territory or years of service. When one saves the life of another at the risk of their own, when they choose sacrifice over safety, when they prove their honor in blood and fire, then the saved becomes bound to the Savior until the debt is repaid." A cold feeling settled in Marcus's stomach. "What exactly are you saying?" The Empress reached into her robes and withdrew a crystal that pulsed with inner light. When she spoke next, her words seemed to echo from the walls themselves. "I invoke the Kavethara, the dead eternal, by the blood you shed for my daughter, by the courage you showed in darkness, by the promise you kept when death seemed certain. I bind myself to you, Captain Marcus Chen, until such time as this debt is balanced." The crystal in her hand flared bright, and Marcus felt something shift in the air around them. It was like a weight settling on his shoulders, invisible but undeniably real. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "I appreciate the gesture, but this isn't necessary." "This is not a gesture," the Empress said sharply. "This is law, ancient law, written in the foundation of our empire. The Kavethara has been invoked only 7 times in our recorded history. Each time it has bound ruler to subject until death or balance is achieved." Marcus stared at her. "You're serious? Completely? And this means what exactly?" The Empress sat down in the chair beside his bed, and for a moment she looked less like an all-powerful ruler and more like a tired mother. "It means that until I can repay what you have done for my family, you are under my protection and in my debt. It means that your well-being becomes my responsibility. It means that your honor becomes linked to mine. That's very kind. But I don't need—" "It also means," the Empress continued, her voice hardening, "that you cannot leave my service without my permission. The debt must be balanced, Captain Chen. Until it is, you belong to the Valorian Empire." The cold feeling in Marcus's stomach turned to ice. "Belong? Poor choice of words," she admitted. "You are not property, but you are bound by ancient law to remain where I can ensure your safety and honor." The alternative would be to allow the one who saved my daughter to face danger unprotected. This would be a greater dishonor than the original debt. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to process what she was telling him. How long does this usually last? The shortest period on record was 12 years. The longest, she paused, the longest has not yet ended. Lord Kenthara saved Emperor Thylus IV from assassination 6 centuries ago. His descendant still serves the throne. 6 centuries, Marcus repeated faintly. Time moves differently when you live among the stars, the Empress said gently. What matters is not the length of service, but the honor in it. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at her. Really looked. What he saw was someone who believed completely in what she was saying. This wasn't a trick or a political maneuver. In her mind, she was bound by laws older than human civilization to keep him safe and honored. The problem was that her idea of safety might not match his. What if I don't agree to this? He asked. The law has already been invoked, she replied. Your agreement is not required. However, I would prefer your cooperation. And if I try to leave anyway? The Empress was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was very soft. Then I would be forced to stop you. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Allowing you to leave would dishonor both of us. Marcus felt a headache building behind his eyes. This is insane. This is tradition. In your own culture, do you not have concepts of honor and debt that transcend simple economics? She had a point. Humans did understand loyalty and obligation, even when it went beyond what was practical. But this felt different. This felt like a trap made of good intentions. What exactly do you expect from me? Marcus asked. Continue as you have, the Empress said. Serve as advisor. Share your tactical knowledge. Help us understand human military thinking. In return, you will be given every honor and comfort the Empire can provide. It sounded reasonable. Almost too reasonable. And when will this debt be considered paid? The Empress smiled, but there was something sad in her expression. When I can save your life as completely as you saved my daughter's. When I can prove that the protection I offer equals the sacrifice you made. When the balance is restored. Marcus thought about this. Saving someone's life in a way that matched what he had done for Princess Lyrelay would require facing similar dangers, similar odds, similar choices. Between safety and honor, the chances of that happening were remote. The chances of it happening anytime soon were essentially zero, I see, he said, quietly. I hope you can understand, the Empress said, standing up. This is not punishment. This is the highest honor my people can bestow. You will want for nothing. Your position will be elevated. Your counsel will be valued above all others, except my freedom. Freedom is often overrated, she replied. Purpose is far more valuable. Marcus watched her move toward the door, her ceremonial robes flowing behind her like liquid starlight. Just before she reached the exit, he called out, Your Majesty, what if the debt can never be repaid? What if the opportunity never arises? She turned back to look at him, and in her violet eyes he saw something that might have been sympathy. Then you will live as the most honored person in the Empire, she said, and I will live with the knowledge that I can never truly repay what you have given my family. After she left, Marcus lay back in his bed and stared at the ceiling. The painted figures above him seemed to be moving faster now, dancing through scenes of ancient ceremonies and binding oaths. He had saved the princess and survived impossible odds. In any reasonable universe, that should have been the end of the story. Instead, it seemed to be only the beginning. Outside his window, the spires of the imperial capital stretched toward alien stars, beautiful and vast and utterly foreign. Somewhere in those towers, decisions were being made that would affect billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. And now, apparently, he was going to be part of those decisions whether he wanted to be or not. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to sleep. But even in his dreams, he could feel the weight of invisible chains forged from gratitude and honor, binding him to a fate he had never chosen. The debt eternal had been invoked, and eternity, as the Empress had said, could be a very long time. 3 months after the Empress declared the debt eternal, Marcus tried to go home. It seemed reasonable enough. His injuries had healed, his duties as advisor were light, and he had accumulated enough leave time to visit Earth for a few weeks. He filed the proper paperwork, booked passage on a human merchant vessel, and packed his few belongings. He made it exactly 12 hours into the journey before Valorian ships appeared on either side of the merchant freighter. Captain, Chen, came the polite voice over the communication system, the Empress requests your immediate return to the capital. There are urgent matters requiring your attention. Marcus looked out the porthole at the sleek Valorian destroyers keeping pace with the freighter. Their weapons weren't powered up, but the message was clear enough. What urgent matters? He asked into his communicator. Strategic planning for the upcoming war games, sir. Your expertise is required. Marcus had been to exactly 3 strategy meetings in the past month. His contributions had consisted mostly of nodding and agreeing with plans that the Valorian military had already perfected. They needed his expertise about as much as they needed advice on how to breathe, but he couldn't say that over an open channel. Of course, he replied. I'll transfer back immediately. The return trip to the capital gave him time to think. The Empress had been polite but firm when he was escorted to her private office. She listened to his explanations about wanting to see his family, nodded sympathetically, and then explained why this was impossible. The Kvethara requires that I ensure your safety at all times, she said, sitting behind a desk that was probably worth more than most human colonies. Travel through uncontrolled space presents unacceptable risks. The shipping lanes between here and Earth are perfectly safe, Marcus protested. Thousands of people make that journey every year. Thousands of people are not bound by ancient law to the Valorian throne, the Empress replied. If something happened to you during such a journey, the dishonor would be catastrophic. Marcus tried a different approach. What if I traveled on a Valorian ship? With a full escort? The Empress considered this for a moment, then shook her head. Even our best ships can suffer mechanical failures. Pirates still exist in some sectors. The risk, however small, is unacceptable. So I can never leave the capital? I didn't say that, she replied. You can travel anywhere within the Empire, under appropriate security arrangements. In fact, I encourage it. See our worlds, meet our people, learn our culture. Marcus felt the walls closing in around him, but not human space. Not while the debt remains unpaid. That night, Marcus stood on the balcony of his apartment and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, maybe 20 light years away, was Earth. His sister was probably getting married next month. His nephew was learning to walk. His parents were getting older, and he wasn't there to help them. But he was the most honored guest in the Valorian Empire. The apartment they had given him was larger than most human houses. It had a view of the palace gardens, a personal staff of 3, and furnishings that would have made a billionaire weep with envy. Everything he could possibly want was available at a word, except the one thing he actually wanted. The pattern became clear over the following weeks. Every time Marcus made plans to leave the capital, urgent business appeared. Strategic consultations, cultural exchanges, ceremonial duties that required his specific presence. The Empress was always apologetic about these interruptions. She would explain the importance of each task, express regret for the inconvenience, and promise that his travel plans could be rescheduled soon. But somehow, that soon never seemed to arrive. Marcus began to understand that he was living in the most luxurious prison ever constructed. The bars were made of courtesy and tradition, but they were still bars. Then the promotion started. Captain Chen, the Empress announced during a formal court session, your service to the Empire has been exemplary. It is our pleasure to elevate you to the rank of Strategic Advisor, First Class. The rank came with a larger apartment, a bigger staff, and invitations to social events that Marcus had no interest in attending. It also came with expanded duties that seemed designed to keep him busy from dawn to midnight. The Strategic Council meets twice weekly, explained General Thisara, a Valorian officer who served as Marcus's liaison. Your insights into human military doctrine will be invaluable as we plan our defense strategies. Marcus attended the meetings and quickly realized that his role was more ceremonial than practical. The Valorians had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Their tactics were sophisticated. Their technology was superior to anything humans had developed, and their officers were highly trained professionals. They didn't need advice from a human captain, but they listened to him anyway. When he suggested modifications to their fighter formations, they nodded thoughtfully and took notes. When he pointed out potential weaknesses in their defensive strategies, they thanked him gravely and promised to consider his recommendations. A few weeks later, Marcus learned that none of his suggestions had been implemented. The Strategic Council values your perspective, General Thysera explained when Marcus confronted him about this. However, implementation of new tactics requires extensive testing and evaluation. These things take time, and how much time? Perhaps several years, the general said without blinking. Marcus was beginning to suspect that the real purpose of these meetings was not to get his advice, but to give him something to do. Something that would make him feel useful while keeping him firmly under control. The social obligations were worse. As strategic advisor, first class, Marcus was expected to attend diplomatic receptions, cultural festivals, and formal dinners with visiting dignitaries. The Empress always ensured that he was introduced as the hero of the palace, siege, and guests would spend hours asking him to recount his battle with the Senate guards. Marcus learned to give the same abbreviated version of events, emphasizing his duty and minimizing the violence. The Valorians seemed to find his modesty charming, which somehow made the whole experience more irritating. "You have become quite the celebrity," Princess Lyrelai observed during one such event. She had grown more confident in the months since the attack, but she still watched Marcus with something like wonder in her violet eyes. "I never wanted to be a celebrity," Marcus replied, accepting another glass of whatever fermented beverage the Valorians considered sophisticated. "Few people choose fame," the princess said, "but once you have it, the wise thing is to use it well." Marcus looked around the reception hall, filled with the Empire's most powerful and influential citizens. All of them wealthy, all of them connected, all of them perfectly content to spend their lives serving a system that had elevated them above ordinary people. "What if I don't want to use it at all?" he asked. The princess looked confused. "Then what would you want?" It was a simple question, but Marcus found it surprisingly hard to answer. What did he want? To go home, obviously. To see his family, to resume his normal life, to stop being treated like a living symbol of human heroism. But as he thought about it, Marcus realized that even if he could leave tomorrow, things wouldn't go back to the way they were. He had changed during his time in the Empire. The experiences he had gained, the things he had learned, the perspective he had developed, none of that would disappear just because he returned to human space. And there was another problem, a bigger one. Marcus was starting to understand that his presence in the Empire served a purpose beyond repaying ancient debts. He was a bridge between two very different civilizations, a living example of human capability in a galaxy where humans were still considered newcomers. The Empress had mentioned this during one of their private meetings. "Your people and mine have much to offer each other," she had said. "But trust is difficult to build across the void of space. Having a human in a position of honor and authority makes future cooperation more likely." In other words, Marcus wasn't just being kept for his own protection, he was being kept because he was useful, because his presence helped the Empress maintain good relations with humanity while demonstrating Valorian power and generosity. It was diplomacy disguised as gratitude. Marcus found this realization both depressing and oddly liberating. At least now he understood the game being played. The Empress wasn't keeping him prisoner out of misguided honor. She was keeping him because he served her political interests. That, at least, was something he could work with. The opportunity came 2 months later, when a trade dispute erupted between the Valorian Empire and the Human Colonial Alliance. Tariffs on rare earth minerals, territorial rights in disputed systems, the usual bureaucratic nonsense that caused friction between neighbors. "The situation requires delicate handling," the Empress explained during an emergency session of the Strategic Council. "The humans are our allies, but they can be stubborn when they believe their interests are threatened." Marcus cleared his throat. "If I may suggest, Your Imperial Majesty, this might be an excellent opportunity for me to serve as an intermediary. My understanding of both cultures could help smooth negotiations." The Empress studied him carefully. "You believe you could resolve this dispute?" "I believe I could help both sides understand each other better," Marcus replied. "Sometimes conflict arises from miscommunication rather than genuine disagreement." After an hour of discussion, the Strategic Council agreed to send Marcus as a specie. The attack came without warning. Exactly as Marcus had expected it would, he was in the middle of mediating trade negotiations between the Valorian governors and Human Colonial officials when the emergency alarm started, screaming across the Kepler station, through the conference room's massive windows. Marcus could see ships materializing out of quantum space, dozens of them sleek and predatory, bearing the crimson markings of the hegemony. Impossible, breathed Governor Theisalon, his golden skin paling to an unhealthy yellow. Our monitoring stations would have detected any fleet approaching the system. Marcus was already moving toward the tactical display, his mind shifting into combat mode. Not if they used quantum tunneling to bypass your sensor grid. Show me their formation. The holographic display showed the enemy fleet spreading out in a perfect sphere around Kepler Station and the 3 worlds it served. 47 ships ranging from fast attack cruisers to massive dreadnoughts that bristled with weapons Marcus didn't recognize. Their flagship is broadcasting on all frequencies, reported the station's communication officer. They're demanding immediate surrender. How long until Imperial reinforcements arrive? Marcus asked. Governor Theisalon consulted his personal communicator. The nearest battle group is 6 hours away. Even at maximum speed, they cannot reach us in less than 4 hours. Marcus studied the tactical display, noting the enemy's positions and movement patterns. Something about their formation bothered him, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what. What do we know about their weapon systems? He asked. Quantum disruptors, replied Captain Vorthara, the station's military commander. They can phase through our energy shields and tear apart matter at the molecular level. Our defensive systems are useless against them. The human colonial representative, a tough-looking woman named Sarah Chen, who reminded Marcus of his sister, leaned forward. What about evacuation? How many people are on this station? 40,000 Valorians, 12,000 humans, and perhaps 5,000 others, Governor Theisalon said. Evacuation would take days and our transport capacity is limited. Marcus continued to study the enemy formation. There was definitely something familiar about it, something that tugged at his memory. The way the ships were positioned, the spacing between them, the careful coordination of their approach. Captain, he said to Vorthara, show me the historical records of the last war between the Valorians and the hegemony, specifically their naval tactics, sir. The captain looked confused. That war ended over 2 centuries ago. Their tactics have surely evolved since then. Humor me. The display shifted to show archived battle records from conflicts that had happened before Marcus was born. Fleet movements, engagement patterns, victory and defeat marked out in cold tactical notation. And there it was. Son of a bitch, Marcus whispered, then caught himself. Excuse me, Governor, but I think I know what they're doing. All eyes turned to him. Sarah Chen was the first to speak. Explain. Marcus pointed to the tactical display. This isn't a standard siege formation. Look at the spacing. They're maintaining exactly 12,000 kilometers between each ship. That's not random. It's designed to create overlapping fields of quantum disruption. To what purpose? Asked Governor Theisalon. They're not planning to destroy the station, Marcus said grimly. They're planning to capture it intact. The quantum disruptors will disable all our technology without damaging the infrastructure. Then they'll board and take control. Captain Vorthara shook his head. Impossible. Quantum weapons don't work that way. They either destroy, or they don't. They do if you modulate the frequency correctly, Marcus replied. It's an old human naval tactic adapted for space warfare. I've seen something like this before. That was a lie. Marcus had never seen anything like this before in his life. But he had read about something similar in ancient Earth naval history. The Battle of Copenhagen, when Admiral Nelson had used a similar strategy to neutralize enemy ships without sinking them. The problem was that the Valorians didn't think in terms of historical precedent. Their technology was so advanced that they rarely looked to the past for solutions to current problems. Humans, on the other hand, had a saying, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Even if you're correct, said Governor Theisalon, how does this help us? We still cannot penetrate their quantum shielding, and our weapons are useless against their formation. Marcus smiled, and several people in the room took an involuntary step backward. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that meant someone was about to do something dangerous and probably stupid. Governor, what's the oldest piece of technology on this station? What? I don't understand the question. Humor me. What's the most primitive, outdated, obsolete piece of equipment currently operational on Kepler Station? Governor Theisalon looked confused, but he consulted his data pad. The cargo rail system, I suppose. It's over 300 years old, Uses magnetic acceleration rather than quantum manipulation. We keep meaning to upgrade it, but perfect, Marcus said. And what kind of cargo does it normally transport? Raw materials mostly. Iron ore, titanium, rare earth deposits from the mining operations. Marcus turned to Sarah Chen. The human merchant ships in dock, do any of them carry kinetic weapons? Sarah's eyes widened as she began to understand what he was thinking. The cargo hauler Prometheus has railguns for asteroid mining. They're primitive as hell, but they can punch through almost anything if you get close enough. Outstanding. Marcus turned back to the tactical display and began sketching out ship positions with his finger. Captain Vorthara, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? The Valorian officer looked uncertain. Sir, with respect, you're suggesting we fight quantum weapons with, what, rocks and primitive projectile weapons? Not rocks, Marcus corrected. Cannonballs. For the next hour, Marcus outlined his plan to a room full of people who thought he had lost his mind. It was audacious, reckless, and based on tactical principles that were older than spaceflight. It was also the only chance they had. The hegemony fleet maintained their perfect formation as the evacuation began. Valorian ships departed the station in small groups, following the traffic patterns that Marcus had carefully designed. To an outside observer, it looked like a panicked exodus. In reality, it was the most carefully orchestrated military maneuver in recent galactic history. The human merchant ships were the key. They moved slowly, seemingly overloaded with refugees, their primitive engines struggling to achieve escape velocity. The hegemony fleet ignored them, focusing instead on the Valorian military vessels that posed the only apparent threat. Phase 1 complete, reported Captain Vorthara from the station's command center. All ships are in position. Marcus watched the tactical display with the focused intensity of a chess master contemplating checkmate. Everything depended on timing. One mistake, one ship out of position, and 40,000 people would die. Prometheus and Hercules. Begin your approach, he ordered. On the display, 2 human cargo haulers broke away from the refugee convoy and began moving toward the enemy formation. They accelerated slowly, their engines running at minimal power to avoid detection. The hegemony ships noticed them, of course, but cargo haulers posed no threat to warships equipped with quantum shielding. A few ships shifted position to intercept, but most of the fleet maintained their formation. That was their first mistake. Station cargo rail. Load and prepare to fire, Marcus commanded. Deep in the bowels of Kepler Station, an ancient magnetic accelerator that hadn't been designed for warfare began charging its capacitors. The cargo it was preparing to launch wasn't the usual raw materials. Instead, the rail system had been loaded with every piece of dense metal they could find. Titanium ingots, depleted uranium, chunks of asteroidal iron, anything heavy and hard that could survive the acceleration. Rail system charged and ready, came the report. Marcus waited. On the display, the human cargo ships continued their seemingly harmless approach toward the enemy fleet. The hegemony ships moved to intercept, breaking their perfect formation for the first time. That was their second mistake. Fire. The cargo rail launched its payload at 7 kilometers per second. Chunks of metal the size of automobiles shot out of the station like bullets from a gun, traveling too fast for the enemy sensors to track and too primitive for their quantum shields to stop. The projectiles tore through the hegemony formation like grape shot through paper. Ships that had been positioned to create overlapping fields of quantum disruption suddenly found themselves dealing with plain old kinetic energy. Physics, as it turned out, didn't care how advanced your technology was. 3 enemy ships died in the first salvo, their hulls torn open by chunks of iron moving at relativistic speeds. The rest of the fleet scattered, their perfect formation destroyed. That was when the human cargo ships revealed their true purpose. Prometheus and Hercules, you are cleared to engage, Marcus ordered. The overloaded cargo haulers suddenly shed their camouflage, revealing the military-grade railguns hidden beneath false cargo. Marcus stood in the Empress's private garden, watching alien flowers bloom under 3 moons. It had been 2 years since the battle at Kepler Station, and the Empire had not been quiet. Trade wars, border disputes, diplomatic crises, all requiring the special perspective that only a human military advisor could provide. He had saved the Empire 4 more times since Kepler, each victory proof that human tactical thinking offered solutions that Valorian military doctrine couldn't match. The Empress had elevated him to Supreme Strategic Advisor, given him his own staff, and made his counsel essential to every major military decision. Marcus had everything he could possibly want except the one thing that mattered. "You're planning to leave again?" The voice came from behind him, soft but certain. Marcus didn't turn around. He had learned to recognize the Empress's footsteps, the rustle of her robes, the subtle shift in air pressure that announced her presence. "Yes," he said simply, "even knowing that I cannot allow it. Yes." The Empress moved to stand beside him, her small figure almost lost in the shadows of the garden's massive trees. For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the night sky. "The Kvethara," she began. "Is a prison," Marcus interrupted. "A beautiful, honorable, necessary prison, but still a prison. It is protection. It is honor. It is slavery with a diplomatic name." Marcus finally turned to face her, and the Empress took a step back at what she saw in his eyes. "Your Imperial Majesty, I've served loyally for 3 years. I've saved your empire multiple times. I've proven my value beyond any reasonable doubt. When does it end?" The Empress was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You want me to release you from the debt." "I want you to admit that the debt was never real," Marcus replied. "You didn't keep me here out of honor. You kept me here because I'm useful, because human thinking gives you an advantage over your enemies, because having a tame human validates your empire's power and generosity." The words hung in the air between them like accusations. "That's not—" the Empress started, then stopped. Her shoulders sagged slightly. "It's not that simple, isn't it?" Marcus stepped closer. "Your Imperial Majesty, I don't blame you for what you did. You're responsible for the lives of billions of people across hundreds of worlds. When you found something that could help protect them, you used it. That's what leaders do. But I'm done being used. I'm done pretending this is about ancient honor and eternal debts. I'm done being a symbol instead of a person." The Empress looked up at him, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked fragile. Not the ruler of a galactic empire, but a woman facing a choice she didn't want to make. "If I release you," she said quietly, "you'll return to human space. You'll share what you've learned here. The tactical advantages we've gained will be lost. Maybe," Marcus admitted. "Or maybe formal cooperation between our species will give you even greater advantages." "And if I don't release you?" Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then you'll discover that humans have one more tactical doctrine you haven't learned yet. Which is, we're very good at finding ways to leave places we don't want to be." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. The Empress studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You've been planning this for months." "Years," Marcus corrected. "Ever since I realized that the debt eternal was never going to end on its own." "What do you want?" Marcus had been preparing for this question for a long time. "I want you to choose, Your Imperial Majesty. Not as a ruler protecting her empire, but as a person making a moral decision." "Explain." "Release me from the Kvethara. Let me go home. In exchange, I'll recommend that the Human Colonial Alliance open formal military cooperation with the Valorian Empire. Joint training exercises, shared tactical doctrine, technology exchange programs, everything you've gained from keeping me prisoner but honest and above board." The Empress was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "And if I refuse? Then I'll find a way to leave anyway. And when I do, the story I tell about the Valorian Empire won't be about honor and ancient traditions. It'll be about a ruler who kept a human prisoner for 3 years because it was convenient." The Empress flinched as if he had struck her. "You would lie about your treatment here?" "I wouldn't have to lie," Marcus replied. "The truth is damaging enough. How do you think humanity will react when they learn that one of their citizens has been held against his will for 3 years? How do you think your own people will react when they discover that their Empress has been violating the very principles she claims to uphold?" "I have upheld every principle. You've upheld the letter of ancient law while violating its spirit," Marcus interrupted. "The Kvethara was meant to ensure that great sacrifices were properly honored. It was never meant to be a tool for political control." The Empress turned away from him, looking out at the lights of the capital city. Marcus could see the reflection of stars in her violet eyes. "You're asking me to choose between the safety of my empire and my personal honor," she said. "Finally, I'm asking you to realize that they're the same thing, Marcus replied. An empire built on lies and justified by false honor won't last. Your people deserve better. You deserve better. And what about the debt? What about the life you saved? What about the honor you've earned? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. Your Imperial Majesty, the life I saved was your daughter's. But in the 3 years since then, you've saved mine. You've given me experiences I never could have had, knowledge I never could have gained, perspectives I never could have developed. If we're talking about debts, I'd say we're even. The Empress laughed, but there was no humor in it. Even? 3 years of your life in exchange for my daughter's safety? No, Marcus said gently. 3 years of growth and learning and purpose in exchange for the chance to make a difference. I'm not the same person who fought those guards in the tower. You've changed me, Your Imperial Majesty. The question is whether that change was worth the cost. And was it? Marcus thought about everything he had learned. The battles he had won, the problems he had solved, the lives he had saved, the understanding he had gained of alien cultures and galactic politics, the skills he had developed and the confidence he had built. Yes, he said, it was worth it. But it's finished now. We both got what we needed from this arrangement. Now it's time to move on. The Empress was quiet for so long that Marcus began to wonder if she had decided to ignore him entirely. When she finally spoke, her voice was very soft. There is one more thing, she said. Something I haven't told you? Your Imperial Majesty? The Empire faces a threat that our military cannot handle alone. Our intelligence services have detected signs of a massive invasion force gathering beyond the galactic rim. Ships using technology we don't recognize, organized by a species we've never encountered. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. How massive. 10,000 ships. Maybe more. They'll reach our borders within the year. And you think human tactical thinking could help? I think human tactical thinking might be the only thing that could help, the Empress replied. Our enemies have studied our military doctrine for centuries. They know how we fight, how we think, how we plan, but they've never faced human strategies. Marcus understood. This was the Empress's final card, the ultimate justification for keeping him. Not ancient honor or political convenience, but genuine necessity. So you want me to stay and help you fight this invasion? I want you to choose, the Empress said, not as my prisoner, but as my ally. Stay and help us prepare for this war. Not because ancient law compels you, but because you believe it's right. Marcus looked up at the alien sky, thinking about 10,000 ships filled with unknown enemies, thinking about billions of innocent people who would die if the invasion succeeded, thinking about his sister's wedding, his nephew's first steps, his parents growing older without him, thinking about the choice between personal freedom and greater responsibility. If I stay, he said finally, it's as a free man. As an equal partner, not an honored prisoner. The Kvithera ends tonight. Agreed. And when this war is over, I go home. No more ancient laws, no more eternal debts. I serve until the invasion is defeated, then I leave. The Empress hesitated. What if the war lasts decades? Then it lasts decades, Marcus replied. But when it's finished, I go home. And if you're killed in the fighting? Marcus smiled. Then the debt gets balanced the hard way. The Empress was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her robes and withdrew the same crystal she had used 3 years earlier to invoke the Kvithera. This time when she spoke the ancient words, they were different. By the courage you have shown and the wisdom you have shared, by the battles you have won and the trust you have earned, I release you from all bonds and debts. You are free, Marcus Chen. Free to choose your own path. The crystal flared once, then went dark. Marcus felt something shift in the air around him, a weight lifting from his shoulders. And my choice? The Empress asked. Marcus extended his hand to her. Partners? She took his hand and shook it, the formal gesture of alliance between equals. Partners, she agreed. 2 months later, Marcus stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, watching the first of the invasion fleet emerge from quantum space.